How does one place manage to be a desert, a snow-covered mountain range, farmland, wildfire zone, tech capital, and cultural export hub at the same time? Why does California feel less like a state and more like several incompatible realities forced to coexist? Have you noticed how many things here shouldn't work, yet somehow do, day after day? And if this place is constantly on fire, running out of water, and shaking beneath its own feet, why does the world still look to it for ideas, food, and dreams? Stay with us, because California isn't amazing by accident. It's amazing because it keeps surviving conditions that should have broken it. Today, we're opening the file on 60 amazing facts about California. Not the kind you find on postcards or license plates, but the kind that quietly explain why this place feels different the longer you look at it. California isn't just big, famous, or influential. It's structurally extreme. Its geography resists stability. Its population operates at the scale of a nation. Its economy behaves like a gravity well, and its culture exports ideas faster than most places can process them. None of this happens. 1. California has the population of a major country. California is home to nearly 40 million people, a population larger than most countries on Earth. This scale quietly changes how everything functions, from housing and transportation to culture and politics, because decisions ripple across tens of millions of lives at once. A place with that many people can't behave like a typical U.S. state. It has to operate more like a self-contained system. California doesn't just host people, it absorbs them. 2. Its economy would rank among the world's largest. If California were its own country, its economy would sit near the top of global rankings. This economic gravity explains why industries cluster here, despite high costs, congestion, and regulation. Money attracts talent, talent builds systems, and those systems pull in more money. California isn't just wealthy, it's structurally self-reinforcing. 3. The lowest and highest points in the lower 48 share the same state. California contains both the lowest point in North America and the highest point in the contiguous United States. That means desert basins and alpine peaks exist within the same political boundary. This extreme topography shapes climate, water flow, and human settlement patterns in ways most states never experience. California doesn't offer balance, it offers contrast. 4. Much of the state sits on a moving boundary. California is defined by active fault lines that mark the boundary between tectonic plates. Earthquakes aren't anomalies here. They're reminders that the ground itself is temporary. Infrastructure, building codes, and planning evolved around the expectation of movement. In California, stability is engineered, not assumed. 5. Water is transported like a strategic resource. Large portions of California's population and agriculture depend on water moved hundreds of miles. Aqueducts, reservoirs, and canals function as lifelines rather than conveniences. The system works only through constant negotiation between nature, cities, and farms. California doesn't have water, it manages scarcity at scale. At this point, it's clear that California doesn't survive because conditions are favorable. It survives because systems were built to compensate for instability. And next, we're going deeper into how this place feeds a nation, burns every year, and still manages to feel permanent. Nature under constant negotiation. 6. California feeds a continent while fighting drought. California produces a staggering share of America's fruits, vegetables, and nuts, even though much of the state is naturally dry. This paradox exists because farming here depends less on rainfall and more on engineering, timing, and political compromise. Agriculture survives not because conditions are ideal, but because water is redirected, stored, and rationed with precision. California doesn't farm with nature, it bargains with it. 7. Wildfires are a feature, not a bug. Wildfires in California are often described as disasters, but ecologically, fire has always been part of the landscape. What changed is scale. Population density, climate shifts, and decades of suppression turned natural cycles into catastrophic events. Fire now intersects directly with housing, power grids, and insurance systems. In California, fire isn't random, it's structural. 8. The state. 9. Deserts and snow exist side by side. Within a few hours' drive, Californians can move from arid desert basins to snow-covered mountain passes. This compression of climates reshapes how people experience distance and seasonality. Weather isn't regional, it's situational. California doesn't change seasons, it stacks them. 10. National parks exist inside active human systems. California has more national parks than any other state, yet none exist in isolation. Tourism, conservation, wildfire management, and nearby cities constantly interact with protected land. Preservation here isn't passive, it's negotiated daily. California doesn't lock nature away, it manages it in public view. So far, California looks less like a place and more like a balancing act between land and people, fire and water, preservation and use. And next, that balance gets even stranger, because we're moving into how this state shapes culture, technology, and ideas far beyond its borders. A state that exports reality. 11. Hollywood didn't just make movies, it standardized imagination. Hollywood isn't simply an entertainment industry, it's a system that standardized how stories look, sound, and feel worldwide. Because California concentrated talent, capital, and technology early, its storytelling norms became global defaults. This means ideas born in one region quietly shape expectations everywhere else. California doesn't just tell stories, it sets the template. 12. Silicon Valley normalized reinvention as a career path. In most places, failure is a warning. In Silicon Valley, it's treated as iteration. That mindset emerged because capital, talent, and risk tolerance collided repeatedly in a tight geographic loop. Careers here evolved through resets rather than ladders. California didn't invent disruption, it made it routine. 13. Trends start here before they become invisible. From technology to lifestyle habits, California often incubates trends long before they're noticed elsewhere. By the time the rest of the world reacts, the state has already moved on. This creates a strange effect where California feels ahead and outdated at the same time. Innovation here doesn't pause, it cycles. 14. The state that markets a way of life. California doesn't only export products, it exports a vision of how life should look. Sunlit, flexible, reinventable. That image fuels migration, investment, and aspiration. The gap between image and reality creates tension, but also momentum. California sells possibility more than accuracy. 15. Culture moves faster than infrastructure. Ideas in California scale globally in months, while housing, transportation, and utilities evolve slowly. This mismatch creates chronic pressure points across cities. The state feels perpetually under construction, because it is. California isn't unfinished, it's outpaced. At this point, California stops feeling like a place and starts behaving like a signal amplifier, taking ideas, accelerating them, and releasing them back into the world. But scale has consequences. And next, we're looking at what happens when millions of people try to live inside a system that never stops updating. Living inside permanent pressure. 16. California builds cities faster than it can house people. California's cities attract people at a pace that consistently outstrips housing supply. Zoning laws, environmental review, and local resistance collide with population growth, slowing construction even as demand explodes. The result isn't just high prices, it's a constant sense of spatial compression. California doesn't lack space, it lacks alignment. 17. Homelessness exists beside extreme wealth. Few places display the contrast between prosperity and precarity as visibly as California. Economic opportunity concentrates wealth rapidly, while housing scarcity pushes vulnerable populations into public view. The contradiction isn't accidental. It's a byproduct of scale and cost. California's success casts a long shadow. 18. Commutes are measured in time, not distance. In California, a short distance can take hours depending on when you move through it. Traffic isn't just congestion, it's a daily negotiation with geography, employment centers, and infrastructure limits. Time becomes the real currency of mobility. California doesn't stretch miles, it stretches minutes. 19. Migration never really stops here. California is both a destination and a departure point, with people constantly arriving and leaving. This churn refreshes culture, but strains systems built for stability. Communities are perpetually redefined. California isn't settled, it's circulating. 20. Climate pressure is already part of daily life. Droughts, heat waves, and wildfire seasons aren't future scenarios, they're calendar items. Residents plan routines around environmental risk the way others plan around weather. Adaptation isn't optional, it's cultural. California doesn't wait for climate change, it lives with it. By now, California feels less like a state and more like a stress test of infrastructure, governance, and human adaptability. And next, we're moving into the contradictions that define everyday life here. Progress and resistance, innovation and nostalgia, all sharing the same space. Progress that argues with itself. 21. California regulates innovation while creating it. California is home to some of the most aggressive regulation in the country and some of the most disruptive industries on Earth. This tension exists because innovation here moves faster than consensus, forcing rules to chase realities already in motion. The result is a constant push and pull between permission and prevention. California doesn't choose between freedom and control, it makes them negotiate. 22. Environmental protection coexists with environmental risk. The state enforces some of the strictest environmental standards in the world while simultaneously facing severe ecological stress. Wildfires, droughts, and coastal erosion exist alongside conservation laws and climate leadership. Protection doesn't eliminate risk, it manages exposure. California doesn't claim safety, it commits to mitigation. 23. Local control shapes statewide outcomes. California's political structure gives cities and counties significant autonomy. This empowers local decision-making, but complicates statewide solutions for housing, transit, and infrastructure. Progress happens unevenly, patch by patch. California isn't governed as one place, it's negotiated as many. 24th. Ballot initiatives let voters design the system. Californians don't just vote for leaders, they vote directly on laws and budgets. This system allows rapid reform, but can lock in contradictions when long-term trade-offs aren't obvious. Policies reflect moments as much as planning. California writes its future in chapters, not outlines. 25. The state is both a trendsetter and a cautionary tale. Other regions watch California to see what might come next, both promising and problematic. Successes are copied, failures are debated. The state functions as a live experiment running at full scale. California doesn't just lead, it exposes consequences. At this point, California feels less like a finished system and more like a prototype, constantly revised, rarely settled. And next, we're stepping back into the human scale, how identity, diversity, and contradiction coexist inside a place this large, a place with no single identity. 26. California is one of the most linguistically diverse places on Earth. California is home to hundreds of spoken languages, not because of recent trends, but due to decades of continuous migration layered on top of deep indigenous roots. Entire communities operate bilingually or multilingually without thinking of it as remarkable. Language here isn't a marker of difference, it's a daily tool. California doesn't translate itself, it overlaps. 27. There is no typical Californian. Trying to define a typical Californian collapses almost immediately. 28. Immigration shapes the state more than any single policy. California's cultural evolution is driven less by legislation and more by who arrives, stays, and builds communities. Food, language, labor, and business patterns shift faster than laws can respond. Change feels constant because it is. California doesn't preserve culture, it updates it. 29. Regional rivalries exist inside the same state. Northern and Southern California often feel culturally distinct, sometimes competitively so. Climate, history, economy, and media representation pull regions in different directions. Yet both operate under the same legal and political structure. California argues with itself without breaking apart. 30. Diversity is structural, not symbolic. In California, diversity isn't a slogan. It's embedded in schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods. This creates resilience, but also friction, as systems adapt unevenly. Harmony isn't automatic. It's negotiated daily. California doesn't promise unity. It practices proximity. At this point, California no longer feels like a place defined by borders. It feels like a moving mosaic, constantly rearranged by people, language, and history. And next, we're turning to the quieter contradictions, the ones that don't make headlines, but shape daily life all the same. The invisible rules of daily life. 31. Cost of living functions like an entry filter. California's high cost of living isn't just an economic issue. It quietly filters who can stay, where, and for how long. Wages, housing, and opportunity rise together, but not at the same speed. People adapt by clustering, commuting longer, or redefining normal. California doesn't price people out abruptly. It pressures them gradually. 32. Flexibility becomes a survival skill. Jobs change, neighborhoods shift, and industries rise and fall faster than in most places. Long-term stability often comes from adaptability rather than permanence. Californians learn to pivot not as ambition, but as maintenance. Here, flexibility isn't optional, it's environmental. 33. Space is measured emotionally, not geographically. Personal space in California is less about square footage and more about access to light, air, and time. Small apartments feel livable if they shorten commutes or improve quality of life. Value isn't static, it's situational. California teaches people to trade space for experience. 34. Everyday life is built around risk awareness. Earthquakes, fires, droughts, and heat quietly shape daily decisions. Preparedness becomes cultural rather than exceptional. Risk is normalized, not dramatized. California doesn't live in fear, it lives informed. 35. Temporary often becomes permanent. Many people arrive in California planning to stay briefly. Jobs, relationships, and inertia extend timelines quietly. The state absorbs intention without asking for commitment. California doesn't trap people, it delays departure. At this point, California feels less like a destination and more like a current. Easy to enter, harder to exit, and always moving. And next, we're looking at how time behaves differently here, how trends age faster, memory shortens, and reinvention never quite stops. A place where time moves differently. 36. Trends age faster here than almost anywhere else. In California, ideas often peak quickly because exposure is immediate and saturation arrives fast. What feels innovative today can feel outdated within months as attention moves on. This compresses creative life cycles and rewards speed over permanence. California doesn't wait for trends to mature. It exhausts them. 37. Reinvention is expected, not celebrated. Changing careers, identities, or goals isn't framed as failure here. It's normal maintenance. The environment rewards experimentation because opportunities reappear quickly. Staying the same can feel riskier than starting over. California treats reinvention as routine upkeep. 38. Memory is short, momentum is long. Past successes and failures fade quickly as new narratives take over. This allows rapid recovery, but weakens institutional memory. Lessons are relearned instead of preserved. California moves forward faster than it remembers. 39. Youth culture shapes adult systems. Trends driven by younger generations often reshape industries before older systems can resist. Technology, language, and social norms shift upward instead of trickling down. Authority adapts to relevance. California lets youth set the tempo. 40. Time feels accelerated by opportunity density. With so many paths available, choices multiply and timelines shorten. People measure life in phases rather than decades. Progress feels fast, even when direction is unclear. California doesn't stretch time, it densifies it. By now, California feels less like a state anchored in history and more like a place in perpetual motion. But motion leaves traces, and next, we're examining the quiet costs and unexpected advantages of living inside a system that never truly slows down. The cost of living at the edge. 40 only. Burnout is a common side effect of opportunity. California offers density of opportunity that few places can match, but that same density compresses competition. When everyone around you is building, launching, or reinventing, rest can feel like falling behind. Burnout becomes less about weakness and more about exposure time. California doesn't exhaust people intentionally, it overwhelms them by abundance. 42. Resilience becomes a learned skill. Living amid environmental risk, economic pressure, and constant change quietly trains adaptability. People learn to plan, replan, and recover without treating disruption as catastrophe. Resilience isn't heroic here, it's procedural. California teaches survival through repetition. 43. People stay even when it's hard to explain why. Despite cost, congestion, and stress, many Californians struggle to articulate why they remain. The reasons aren't singular, they're layered. Weather, culture, work, momentum, identity. Leaving feels like subtracting possibilities, even when staying costs more. California retains people through potential, not comfort. 44. The trade-off is constantly renegotiated. Quality of life in California isn't fixed, it's recalculated regularly. People trade space for access, money for time, stability for possibility. No decision feels permanent because conditions keep shifting. California doesn't offer balance, it offers choice under pressure. 45. The state functions as a long-term stress test. Policies, infrastructure, culture, and people are pushed to limits earlier here than elsewhere. Some systems fail, others adapt, and the results become case studies for the rest of the country. California reveals problems sooner because it scales them faster. It's not ahead, it's exposed. At this point, California looks less like an outlier and more like a preview, a place where future pressures arrive early and solutions are tested in public. And in the final stretch, we're stepping back to ask why, after everything, you still can't ignore this place. Why California still pulls the world in. 46. California solves problems by scaling them first. Many of the issues California faces, housing shortages, water stress, climate adaptation, aren't unique. They simply appear here earlier because population density and economic activity amplify them faster. Solutions are tested under pressure rather than in theory. California doesn't predict the future, it accelerates it. 47. Global attention never really leaves. Even during downturns, California remains a reference point for trends, policy experiments, and cultural shifts. What happens here is watched, debated, and often copied elsewhere. Visibility is both advantage and burden. California can't disappear quietly. 48. Reinvention is built into the landscape. From gold rush towns to tech campuses, entire regions have reinvented themselves multiple times. Economic identity shifts without erasing the past entirely. Failure leaves infrastructure that becomes opportunity later. California repurposes history instead of discarding it. 49. People come for opportunity, stay for identity. Many arrive chasing jobs, climate, or ambition. Over time, staying becomes less transactional and more personal. California becomes part of how people describe themselves. The place turns into a lens. 50. California feels like a destination even to its residents. Despite living here, many Californians still treat the state as something to explore rather than finish. There's always another region, subculture, or version of life to try. Familiarity never fully replaces curiosity. California stays unfinished, on purpose. At this point, California stops being a collection of facts and starts feeling like a pattern, a place where scale, contradiction, and momentum interact continuously. But to understand why it still matters so much, we have to zoom out one last time. How California redefines normal. 51. California normalizes what once felt extreme. Ideas that feel radical elsewhere, remote work cultures, plant-based diets, climate adaptation measures, often appear in California years earlier. Exposure and repetition reduce shock faster than debate ever could. What begins as fringe becomes routine through daily use. California doesn't argue ideas into normalcy, it lives them there. 52. The state shapes national expectations, quietly. Housing prices, labor trends, technology habits, and even slang often migrate outward from California. Other regions react later to pressures Californians already adapted to. This creates a lag where California feels ahead and out of touch simultaneously. The state doesn't lead by command, it leads by gravity. 53. Innovation here comes with cultural side effects. New systems solve problems while introducing new behaviors, incentives, and stresses. Ride-sharing, social media, and flexible work changed daily life far beyond their original intentions. California exports consequences along with solutions. Progress arrives bundled. 54. California makes contradictions livable. Extreme wealth and visible poverty. Preservation and development. Innovation and nostalgia coexist daily. Instead of resolving these tensions, the state absorbs them. Life continues inside unresolved systems. California survives contradiction by normalizing it. 55. The state acts as America's prototype. Policies, technologies, and lifestyles are tested here under real-world conditions. Some succeed, others fail visibly. The results inform decisions elsewhere. California doesn't claim perfection, it offers data. At this point, California feels less like a location and more like a process, constantly redefining itself, and in the process, reshaping expectations far beyond its borders. And now, in the final stretch, we're looking at what all of this leaves behind. What California leaves behind. 56. California is always documenting itself. Few places are photographed, filmed, analyzed, and discussed as constantly as California. From movies to social media, the state records itself in real time. This self-documentation feeds identity, myth, and expectation simultaneously. California doesn't just exist, it archives itself. 57. Failure is more visible than elsewhere. When things go wrong in California, the scale makes failure public. Collapsed startups, policy mistakes, and environmental disasters unfold under global attention. Visibility magnifies perception, not frequency. California doesn't fail more, it fails louder. 58. Reinvention leaves ghosts. Old industries, towns, and infrastructures don't vanish. They linger beneath new layers. Gold rush trails, aerospace plants, and early tech campuses still shape land use today. The past isn't erased, it's repurposed. California builds futures on top of unfinished histories. 59. People project meaning onto the state. For some, California represents hope. For others, excess. For others, warning. The state becomes a mirror for what people fear or desire about modern life. Very few places carry that symbolic weight. California isn't just interpreted, it's used. 60. California never fully resolves itself. There's no final version of California to arrive at. Each generation inherits a version in motion and reshapes it under new pressures. The state remains a draft, not a conclusion. California doesn't finish, it continues. And that completes the picture. 60 facts that don't describe a destination, but a process, one that keeps unfolding whether it's admired, criticized, or misunderstood. When you step back and look at all 60 facts together, California stops feeling like a collection of extremes and starts looking like a system built to survive instability. Nothing here is simple or isolated. Geography resists balance. Population scales beyond intuition. Water has to be moved, negotiated, and rationed. Cities grow faster than they can house people. Culture evolves faster than infrastructure can follow. What makes California remarkable isn't that it has problems. It's that those problems arrive early, arrive loudly, and are managed in public. Climate pressure, housing scarcity, cultural acceleration. Across geography, economy, culture, and daily life, the same pattern repeats. Contradiction isn't resolved, it's normalized. Deserts sit next to snow. Extreme wealth exists beside visible hardship. Innovation thrives under regulation. Reinvention replaces permanence. Californians don't wait for stability, they learn to function without it. This is why California feels ahead and unfinished at the same time. Trends burn faster. Memory shortens. Identity stays fluid. Success and failure cycle quickly, leaving behind layers rather than conclusions. The state doesn't move toward a final version, it updates continuously. Ultimately, California isn't amazing because it's beautiful, rich, or famous. It's amazing because it functions as a live experiment at a scale most places never experience. It reveals what happens when modern pressures are compressed into one place and pushed to their limits. California doesn't offer answers, it offers exposure. And by watching how this system adapts, where it bends, where it breaks, and where it persists, you don't just learn about one state, you get a preview of challenges the rest of the world is slowly moving toward. California is often talked about as if it's an exception, an outlier, an exaggeration, a place that doesn't represent real life. But that framing misses something important. California isn't separate from the world. It's just exposed to modern pressures earlier, faster, and at a larger scale than most places. What you've seen through these 60 facts isn't chaos, it's compression. Climate stress, population growth, housing shortages, cultural acceleration, and technological disruption are not unique problems. California simply experiences them simultaneously. Where other regions face these pressures one at a time, California absorbs them all at once. That's why the state feels contradictory. Stability exists next to instability. Innovation thrives beside resistance. Extreme wealth coexists with visible struggle. These aren't signs of failure, they're indicators of a system operating at its limits. California doesn't resolve its contradictions, it contains them. What's especially revealing is how little of California's story is about perfection. The state fails publicly, mistakes are visible, experiments don't always work. But that visibility creates feedback. Systems adjust, policies evolve, and culture adapts, not smoothly, but continuously. California doesn't promise outcomes, it offers iterations. This is why the state continues to matter globally, not because everyone should imitate it, but because everyone eventually responds to what happens here. Trends that emerge in California, technological, cultural, environmental, don't stay local. They ripple outward, carrying both solutions and side effects. The state acts as a pressure chamber, accelerating realities the rest of the world will face more gradually. California isn't a destination you arrive at and understand. It's a process you observe in motion. Each generation inherits a version already mid-change and leaves it unfinished for the next. That incompleteness isn't a flaw, it's the point. So when people ask whether California is broken, overrated, or unsustainable, the better question is this: what does it teach us by existing the way it does? Because California doesn't offer comfort, it offers exposure. It shows what happens when scale, ambition, and constraint collide without pause. This has been the Absurdist Files, where places behave like systems, where contradictions don't cancel each other out, and where California isn't amazing because it's perfect, but because it keeps functioning in conditions that never stop changing.